In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with a countdown will be given.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Glenn the Geeky Hippie. Welcome back to WoT the Adaptation. We're that YouTube show that reviews adaptations from one form to another. This week we continue on with the Expanse, but first we have a returning guest. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to be here again. Thanks for the invite.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. Jim is the father of the Father and Son channel, Fantasy for the Ages. Really cool channel. You guys really should check them out. So we're discussing episode 206, Paradigm Shift. It was directed by David Grossman, who's known for a lot of things, from Lost, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angels, CSI Crime Scene Investigation, Dead Like Me, Malcolm in the Middle, Ally McBeal, and even Desperate Housewives. So he's pretty...
Bit of a departure from that, but
that's quite a range.
It's a range. It's a good range.
Yep. It was written by the show creators, Hawk Otsby and Mark Fergus. They created the show, and they're the showrunners still at this point, I think. Naren Shankar's a co-executive producer, or just executive producer with them. These guys are known for Children of Men and even Iron Man. They were on the writing teams for both of those.
Good
and
stuff.
this episode first aired on March 1st, 2017 on the Sci-Fi Channel, or Sci-Fi Channel.
Does someone say Siffy?
Yes.
I haven't heard that before. Really? Siffy?
No.
I've heard the joke many times around here, at least.
Okay.
So what'd you guys think of this episode?
What a fantastic episode.
Really different. Yeah, it was interesting.
It was, I liked the episode, but I disagree with some of the choices they made. And we'll get to that later. And I've mostly been in agreement with them this season. Like, all their changes have been like, 2 thumbs up. But this episode, I think they really gutted a certain scene, a certain sequence.
Interesting.
I mean, this was, I think, the trickiest point in the story to adapt, simply because it's coming at the end of a book into the beginning of the next book, but it's in the middle of the season, which I think is very tricky to do. So, because there was a time jump between the two books that they now don't have to work with.
Like a year.
Yeah, like a year. That's gone, that they need to just jump ahead. So, I mean, they could have put a time jump in there, but that might have been even weirder, I think, to do. So
BSG pulled
mid-season.
It off fine 5, 6, or 10 years before, 10, 15 years before. Mid-season, or like right there in the middle of an episode, they did a 1-year time jump.
I agree that was fine, but that would get us very far afield. So.
I think it worked.
Okay. So anyway, let's dive into it. So talking about some of the changes, we already know that Glenn is going to talk about some that might be controversial. So I mean, so maybe we'll just continue on from there. I mean, obviously, like, one of those first changes to talk about is just that there's no 1-year time jump, right? We're just like moving ahead. So by the end of this episode, we have the Ganymede incident, which happens early in book 2. Again, after a year has passed from Eros.
That's actually our introduction to Bobby.
Yeah,
in the book.
Right. We don't see Bobby in the book until that point in Ganymede, whereas we have a little familiarity with her here, which is one difference. But so I think that's interesting because it tells us that there have been other things going on with the protomolecule that we haven't known about up until now, but they have to have been, because here we have, this protomolecule being at the end, and it removes the possibility that Holden thinks of, in the book, that, oh, maybe it was Fred's doing, because Fred knew about the sample that they had recovered. And, so that just takes that possibility right out, right? It can't have been Fred, because this has already been happening, clearly. But he doesn't even know about it yet, but it's going to remove that possibility. So it's interesting choice.
Well, at this point in the books, he gave Fred the sample in the books.
Another change, right? Yeah. Which that didn't happen.
Right.
No, quite the opposite.
Here we have Naomi really pulling the wool over Holden's eyes, because if you watch what buttons she's running a simulation. I didn't catch that until about 3-4 viewings ago. And now I can't help but notice what she's hitting. And he's just oblivious to it. But
it's very subtle. I mean, obviously it gets revealed later, but I mean, you see it a little bit on her face too, that you see a shot of her face after Holden talks to her and leaves. And then, and there's other hints too, that she is.
And I like that. If they had that change of them not giving Fred the pro molecule, I like what she's doing there. It makes sense for the character. I'm going to start.
I think it works because I just want to say a little bit more about that. I mean, this is going to come up later, but you see it in other ways with her in this episode when she's giving some tips to Drummer about the missiles, that she is acting in both of these decisions, I think, because her perspective is that she needs to look out for the belt. She doesn't trust that there aren't people who are going to use this against the belt. And so she's holding on to anything she can do that she thinks will help Belters, because as she says, no one else is going to help us. We have to help ourselves. And I think leaning into her being, at this point, one of the major Belter character that we have, because Miller's gone, it's important that we get that perspective. So that's something they are leaning into about her character through those choices.
Jim, I'll let you go next.
Well, it's something that's consistent in this episode. They are leaning into where people's roots are. So Naomi's doing that because she's a Belter. And so, she's a few different ways. She's clearly leaning more towards them. We see Alex really getting upset at one point because of, we're changing the Mars flag, because he's a Martian, and so he's leaning into his roots. And Holden is, writing home to mom. We're getting connections of where their roots are, and that's their motivations that are
except for Amos. Except for Amos, that one.
Amos is just Amos, man. He's so unique.
He still has that mysterious background that has been hinted at. I'll start out positive. First of all, I really loved the Avasarala Ehrenreich scene where she comes in to have a drink. And she basically announces herself as the Angel of Vengeance or Justice, one of the two, because Grandma scared me in that scene. She was on top of her game.
Very well acted. She comes all in on what she's gonna do to Jean-Pierre Mao if he doesn't come out of the darkness. Ooh,
and his family, and that's why Shora Agnes Liu. We agreed last season. She's automatically, if she's in the episode, she's automatically spotlighted, for top acting in the episode. It's kind of just second nature to her being there.
Did again.
As I joked, if you ever watch or listen to the podcast Ty and That Guy, and they rank things, and Die Hard is always in the 0 spot. It always gets a ranking. It doesn't matter what the category is. So Shori Agdashlu is our Die Hard.
Yep. Definitely. So I liked that scene. I thought it was great. And that doesn't exist in the books. My scene that I think they gutted was the Ganymede incident. I really
definitely
think they
changed
gutted it. We don't have all we know about this thing that comes creeping up over her is that it can live outside, not in an environmental suit. We don't know. We don't know. There's no hint given that it killed all those Marines on both sides.
Yep, they just blew past that completely. You're right.
It looks like they died because stuff crashing down around them and hitting them and shattering. That's kind of what it looks like. They died to me. That they got hit by debris from the mirrors, and I don't know. It just. There's no danger. There's no reason to fear that thing we saw yet. So there's no reason to think of it as a monster. We needed to see it messing shit up.
I'll admit, I felt this time as I was rewatching that were they short some cash in this episode? That they shortcutted all of what they should have shown in that.
Yeah.
That they just, it fades to black. And next thing you know, she's waking up with a little gas leaking out of her mask. We're like, what the heck?
They
So,
spent all their effects budget on the space battle, and which we didn't need. We didn't need to see the external shots of the PDC, cannons firing, and I can't even tell who that first ship is that fires. I can't tell if that's UN or Martian. So I have no idea who started it, because that's where the battle started. And I'll tell you right now, if you look at the Wikia article, the Expanse Wiki article for this episode and the incident in Ganymede, they have the book story on TV, because it does not line up at all. I was literally reading that and watching the episode at the same time, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. And that's when I started really
totally
thinking
focuses on the surface.
Yeah.
It's their experience, the Marines and Bobby's experience, and that's the lens we get it all through in the book.
And you don't get
that was like a teeny piece on the TV episode.
And you go to the book page, because they've got the two tabs, the TV show and then the book. You go to the book tab, and there's like nothing for the incident Ganymede.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I was going to say, like, it's either I can come up with basically two reasons to do it. I mean, one of which is 100% budgetary, that they just wanted to like cut down and didn't want to put the money on that. And the second reason that you could argue for a story reason has more to do with later, which is by not showing everything that happened, you introduce a little bit of uncertainty, because people are going to doubt Bobby. People are going to question her. She may even, they may cause her to doubt herself to some degree, even though she knows what happened. But like, she's going to be questioned, she's going to be doubted. And, maybe it introduces a little bit of doubt as well for the viewer if you haven't seen everything in detail in the same way that you would have in the book. So that's the only story reason I can think of to do it that way. And, so if I'm being charitable, I'll go with that as an explanation, as opposed to it just being 100% budgetary.
right.
But I mean, and certainly I think there's a choice, there are choices made here, because, okay, so I understand wanting to put it at the end of the episode. I think it was smart to put it at the end of this episode. I agree with that. And you could say, okay, well, there's not a lot of time left, but they put a lot of time into this little story with Epstein that they didn't need to do. So that was a choice. That was a choice. They didn't.
That part.
But
I love that they adapted Drive.
I'm not going to say. I do like it.
Blend it in.
I do like it. I think there's a very good reason thematically to have it in there, and so I'll talk about that later. But so I'm not arguing against the choice to have the Epstein story, and I think it was a smart choice, but it was a choice, right? You didn't have to do that.
No.
So.
Yeah, I wish
I liked what you suggested, though, Rebecca, that idea that it may have been more to create the suspense that we don't really know if Bobby is wrong, is flawed, made mistakes. I mean, in the books, we're Team Bobby. We totally know what happened to her.
100%
Come on, guys.
You know.
So this changes the experience for the viewer if they haven't read the books in a way that, I mean, I hadn't thought of your perspective, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So we'll have to kind of watch for that in the episodes coming up where she is having to defend herself and, kind of see if we feel like it's playing a role there. Because I think that's the only thing I can come up with. But. All right. Well, anything more we wanted to say about the Ganymede changes, or do we want to talk about other changes?
No.
Okay. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the Epstein edition. Anything else we wanted to say on that? I mean, basically that was just, like you said,
it was cool.
Moving something else into that story to have to take place at that point. But thematically, I think there was a reason.
It was cool seeing Jimmy Olsen play Solomon Epstein.
It ties nicely into explaining the grander scheme of this conflict between Mars and Earth, and knowing how the belt got expanded. Getting that information here is relevant. Makes sense, but I thought they were really authentic to the short story. Drive.
Yeah, the short story is in first person, isn't it? Isn't the short story in first person too?
Yeah, exactly. And really, it's almost beat for beat. Everything's there. So I really valued that when they put it into the show. I was like, oh, so smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I agree. I like that choice. I'll save more of my thoughts on that for later, but I like it.
One
and then
superfluous change I noticed that I didn't
Yeah.
realize until I was re-listening to the book today. And that's Hilly in the book is a dude. And I'm like, I didn't realize that. I thought they were all the same as what we saw in the show. And then I'm like, wait, what?
Oh, I don't remember that. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's the one who was fixing her getting oil into her knee.
Yeah.
When her
They're not really very like fleshed
And I
out
was like,
characters in the books or
yeah.
crew. So yeah.
Not in the book at all. Not in the book at
No.
all. The show
No.
actually gave
A little bit,
us a
yeah.
reason to an extent to be attached to the characters, even
Sure.
the snotty rich girl.
Even the snotty rich girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other change I was going to mention is they pulled this from the end of Leviathan Wakes, where Fred is giving a speech and talking about like making Miller a symbol, and they sort of gave that idea more to Naomi when she's suggesting that to Fred to focus on Miller and Julie, and using them to basically promote the belt. And I think that fits in with the overall changes for Naomi in this episode. Yeah, right there.
True Beltalada.
Yes, of her, really focusing on what does the belt need? What can we do to protect the belt at this moment in history? And so I like that change, and I like that it brought that in from that little scene of Fred at the end of Leviathan Wakes.
Yeah, I liked that scene in the epilogue, and Fred pushing it, and seeing Naomi push it, since they skipped that, with the, with the scene with Fred, getting ready to speak before the UN and all the other, people.
Yeah.
Since they skipped all that, I like that they gave it to Naomi, and so, because I mean,
It worked.
It works, especially with the relationship Naomi had with Miller. She was always the closest to him of anybody on the crew, because
yes, in the show, in any case, I wouldn't.
In the show,
I don't think that they really emphasize that much in the book of
no.
that Belter relationship that they had, but in the show, absolutely, they played that up, so it made sense.
Definitely.
And I think they just are giving like the Rossi crew a little bit more in general. Like we have that scene between Alex and Amos, again, like sort
Which
of.
Which one? There's a couple.
Yeah. There's a couple, yeah.
There are.
It's a heavy Alex and Amos episode.
It's true. Yeah, there's a couple of them. You're right. And so all of that, I think, is stuff that's kind of added for some development between those characters.
Right. I'll be talking about them later.
Okay.
So,
right. Anything else we wanted to mention for changes, or move on to our next question?
Yeah, we already kind of covered it, but I didn't, I the whole year time, no time jump, okay, but it would have been nice to see like a short amount of time jump, because I wanted to see them do at least one pirate hunting mission, like that one we get in the book, where so the group, the ones that actually finally surrenders, instead of having forcing the Rossi to blow them up. I just, hunting pirates is just such, I mean, that would have gotten more people to watch. You could have gotten a lot more people watch hunting pirates. Who doesn't want to see that in space? So I think that was a missed opportunity. But yeah, other than that, I didn't have any other changes that I particularly liked or disliked, other than really loving that Avasarala Ehrenreich scene. But it's not my number one scene.
Okay. All right.
Spoiler. And I also have to apologize to any French speakers out there. I apologize for mispronouncing Mao's first name. It's not Jules Pierre Mao, like I've always been saying. It's Jules Pierre Mao. And I didn't catch that until a couple of people said his name in this, and they didn't pronounce the S. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know French pronunciation.
Does the audiobook say it wrong? Because I'm not sure now. Yeah,
I don't remember.
As much as the audiobook, I've only read.
As much as I love Jefferson Mays, or whatever his name, Jefferson Mays, some of his pronunciations were a little. I'm
pretty sure he says Jules Pierre Mao with S.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure he does. Anyway, but not important.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about anything to do with scenery, visuals, costumes, VFX. Jim, do you have any thoughts on that? Things you wanted to mention?
I loved it. There wasn't anything that I saw that took me out of the story that I looked at it and go, oh, really? Whoa, that's... I didn't have any reaction like that. I thought the costuming that Avasarala was wearing was magnificent.
Gorgeous.
Each time we saw her, it's like, give them props. Holy crap. That's really gorgeous.
It was gorgeous.
I want the costumes behind you.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
I want a suit of power armor, and I'll go walk into a con wearing a suit of power armor.
So I have only praise to give to this aspect of this episode.
I have to agree. I mean, Avasarala's costumes are always great, but wow, they were really a standout in this episode. I mean,
everything that thing she has up her front, in the meeting episode, I'm like, what is it? It was so intricate, and
it was it's just you always notice her, but not in a way where you're like, it's her. This is one of the ways that she makes her mark, especially because she's always in a room full of men, and she's just like, I'm gonna just take this as far as I can.
And how she can come in later on in that one-on-one scene, and she's gonna get all badass and in his face in this beautiful flowing gown. It's
lovely.
It's fantastic. She owns it. She is who she is.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't have anything, nothing jumped out at me either. And I think that's a lot of it, right? Like in things like this, is anything going to jump out at you and go, that didn't look right? And if it doesn't, then they're doing a good job.
Part of why this show is such a great show is because everything on the production end, everything that's in camera, and pretty much all of the CG is top notch. Sci-Fi Channel and really went all out on it. Not nearly as good sometimes in later seasons when it was at Amazon, but at least in my opinion, some of the CG didn't work nearly as much. But production wise, it's always been one of the top shows on TV. I would put it up there with Game of Thrones, as on quality of production.
Which is rather amazing considering the budgetary differences. I mean, even if you consider first season of Game of Thrones, which obviously didn't have as big a budget, it's still HBO versus Sci-Fi. So
a Sci-Fi show is going to be a little bit cheaper to do because you can use actual clothes from, just do a little bit of switching stuff around.
Oh yeah. With Game of Thrones, budget mainly went to Avasarala. Let's be honest.
Yes,
the rest of
Avasarala and those were not cheap.
Yeah, those probably they weren't. Yeah.
Something that did jump out to me this time, and I don't think I'd caught it before, but in this rewatch, there are some subtle differences that are obviously intentional in the Epstein scenes, in the way the technology is displayed, his handheld device. There's just little nuances that clearly show this is a previous time, and I appreciated that.
I didn't notice that, but that's great. That's a good call out because that is the kind of attention to detail that is really nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone have any dialogue you wanted to comment on, whether it was, something that worked or didn't work, or something the way they adapted it from the book?
Let me find, here it is. This is the best line or best piece of dialogue in the entire show.
Oof.
I have a file with 900 pages of analysis and contingency plans for war with Mars, including 14 different scenarios of what to do if they develop an unexpected new technology. My file for what to do if an advanced alien species comes calling, it's 3 pages long and it begins with step 1, find God.
I love it. I love it.
That's great.
That is just...
it's direct from the book. They just took it from there.
It's brilliance. It's absolute brilliance, and I had to bring it up.
Yeah, and I love that too, because that's one of the early bits of dialogue from the book that we're introduced to Avasarala with. Now, obviously, we're not being introduced to her here. We've seen her for a season and a half. But if you think about it, that is one of the key things that they chose to help us introduce us to Avil in the book. So it's very characteristic of her, which is, you know, she knows that it's a possibility that this is alien technology. But what she's saying is, if that is, what can I do about it, right? So I'm going to focus on the possibility where I have a play-by-play, right? It could be either of these things. And so it tells you a lot about how smart she is and how focused she is, how practical she is, all of these things that, when we were reading that in the book, we didn't know about her yet. And now we do, but it's very characteristic and very well written.
Yeah.
There's a powerful moment I appreciated in the scene back on the ROTC between Amos and Alex, where Amos, Alex is ticked at what had happened, and Amos explains his worldview.
Yeah.
And it's that brilliant line where he says, the way I see it, there's only 3 kinds of people in this world: bad ones you follow, and ones you need to protect. That's all you need to know about Amos. Right there.
That's true. That's true.
And that tells you right there that which category he puts himself into.
Bad ones.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, like I pointed out, he's the character that has the least understanding of right and wrong, maybe. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but but yet, if you look back a couple episodes ago, when Holden was asking, do we put, go up on the juice and go burn after arrows, he looked at all of them, and the only one who made any kind of sign was Amos, to just this tiny little, and it was Amos, the one, kill us to save Earth. He has nobody on Earth he cares about, and yet he was willing. So I don't know. That's why I think we misjudge Amos sometimes. He misjudges himself too.
It's why he's such a fascinating character, because, he has a very clear-eyed, I think in a way, he has a very clear-eyed assessment of himself. But what he doesn't realize is that his self has evolved over time. So I think he's very accurate in recognizing that his own personal moral compass is dented or something, like it doesn't have, that anything that he knows he can trust in himself. But I think he has evolved over time, because I think he does learn from following. He's smart in who he follows, right? He follows Naomi, he follows Holden. And by doing that, by choosing the correct people to follow, he learns from them. And he can start to figure out, they don't always have to tell him what they would do. He can look at them and go, that's what Holden would do. That's what Naomi would do. And he can learn from that, and he can start to sort of make those decisions for himself just by figuring out what they would do, even without them telling him what to do. So I think he what he doesn't give himself credit for is being able to learn and evolve from just making the right choice to follow the right people. He chooses
with
well.
Amos, there's not really a right and wrong. There's stuff you do and stuff you don't do.
Yeah.
And you do things for the people that so he doesn't think twice of smashing a guy's face in because he's giving Alex a hard time. He doesn't think, is this right or wrong? He's just, no, you're messing with my guy. Bam, 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 bam.
Exactly.
And he has no emotion.
So
it's just, you do it.
He's not mad.
It needed to be done. I do it.
Yeah.
How you doing? You okay, bro? That's his only reaction afterwards.
In a D&D situation with the D&D style of alignments, what would you guys peg him for his alignment?
Man,
I'm gonna
could be chaotic good.
I was gonna say chaotic neutral, maybe, with good tendencies.
I was going to say chaotic neutral, but then I'm like, is he really chaotic though? Because he has something that guides him, right? It's not necessarily what would guide someone that you would call lawful, but I don't know that he's chaotic either.
So maybe true neutral.
He's a tough one to nail down.
True neutral, perhaps.
It's a complicated character.
He is complicated,
And you're right. He does figure out he doesn't really have a compass. He needs a North Star. So it's Naomi originally. It shifts more and more to Holden.
Right.
Holden is his center. That's what how he knows what to do.
And
exactly. And but that gives him something that's guiding him, right? So he's not just making his decisions chaotically. It's like, what does Holden want to do, or what would Holden do? You know, and
needs
that
a bracelet,
is
WWHD.
exactly.
What would Holden do? That's what he needs all the time.
Exactly. But I think that the beating up the guy who is fighting with Alex also goes to, this isn't something he's expressed as much now, but it's definitely part of his worldview, which is that you decide who's on your team, right? And then you protect who's on your team. Yep. And you have to draw that line somewhere, that some people are on my team and some people are not on my team. And that's his worldview again. And you then always have that question of, well, who's on your team and who isn't? And in his case, it's fairly small.
He has some interesting choices in the future for who's on his team.
He does.
To quote the great Vin Diesel, it's about family.
That's true. Yeah. So I think that's very, but anyway, going back to what you said, like the dialogue is great because it does tell you, again, everything you need to know about Amos.
Yeah.
Very, very spot on.
One of my favorite characters. Not in my top 4. I've got 4 that I love above any others, but
Amos is great. I love him.
Amos is one of my tops, man.
Yeah, he's one of my
probably number
5. My favorite, actually.
He's probably number 5 for me. But it's in no particular order. It's Fred, Monica Stewart, Bobby Draper, and I'm blanking. No, I guess it was. I guess Amos was, because it was Bobby and Amos, I think. No, Alex. That's who it is, Alex.
Oh yeah, that's right. You put Alex in your top 4 of your of the
and that's why I'm so upset that somebody turned out to be an asshole creep. Because I feel bad every time I get
real life creeping in.
My favorite character. You know, he's one of my favorite characters on the ship, and I'm just like,
it sucks.
Yeah, I especially loved Alex and Bobby's relationship. You know that.
I love that in the books, especially. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Spoilers.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. So, I think let's talk about our most memorable scenes of the episode. And I know
one that's just delightful. It's almost straight out of the book.
Yeah.
When Holden comes clean about their relationship and how the two of them go off and react. It's just delightful.
Loved it too.
It's just the best thing in the episode.
So good.
It's just like, and the way Amos and Alex sat there stony faced for a minute before reacting.
And the question, so when did this start? And it's about the bet. It's not about whether being upset.
All the way through the wet Louie, whatever you gotta call it. You know, it just like you can hear it. I didn't notice
it's gonna be a punch. What is that?
My last one, you can actually hear him lick his wet his finger. Somebody in the Foley department decided to add that, you know, I'm sure, because that wouldn't have picked up on the mic, I don't think.
It would be, and I don't know this, but it would be hilarious if that was ad-libbed. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
that would be hilarious. The one line I think was ad-libbed was a week or two ago, you know, when Amos hits bombs away, and then it turns and says, I always wanted to say that. I don't know, man. That just felt it felt like it was ad-libbed. You know, that wasn't what anything at all. And they just they loved it so much they kept it.
Yeah. But that's so funny that was all of ours, because 100% that was mine. I'm like, you know, it's not an essential scene. It's kind of funny that they're even putting it here. But it was just so well done. It was just such a well done scene. And like, I love the little bet thing. And it was great. I loved it.
All the way through to,
and then you just go that little bit later. You know, Holden had been worried, of course. You know, how is Amos going to take it? It's like, so yeah, we are okay. It's like, oh yeah, she's like a sister.
Like a sister. I'd do her if she let me.
I'd do her if she let me. But
right. And I'm just like
that's what he
man.
Said.
Thanks. Yeah.
Like, I think he said that before.
He says it.
Amos knows what he thinks. He's like, she's like a sister, but I'd do her. Okay.
Yeah. Fair. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, you know, it's great scene. All right. Well, good. We're all in agreement. We can move on.
That doesn't happen that often, that we all hit on the same scene.
No.
I already talked about the scene I disliked, you know, the way they did the Ganymede incident. So
yeah.
And we're kind of in agreement there. It's shortchanged from what we should have got.
Yeah. All right. So Then we talk about the cast members from this episode who were standouts, in whatever way you want to take that. I suppose we hardly ever pick anybody we don't like, but you can if you want to, or who you want to talk about who did well in this episode.
I'll let you guys go first because I got 3 names like usual, and I don't want to steal a name if you've only got one. So
go ahead, Jim.
Well, I've got 2 that stand out as good ones for me. I'm almost always an Amos stan. So I really appreciate how well he plays the character. He channels this quirky, non-passion character. You know, he does what he does, and then he's fine. He's always cool. It's fine. You know, he's got it. And I really like how he brought Book Amos to life.
He's always a good shout out because I think he's a very, very tough character to get right and a very easy character to get very wrong. And so, I think it's Wes Chatham always deserves a shout out just because I think it's a tough character.
I think he's the most complicated character on the show.
I do.
And maybe even the most complicated character in the books. Although
there's an argument to be made there.
Miller's pretty complicated too.
He's not around as long, you know?
No,
right. And Amos is around a long time. Okay, spoilers again.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Same.
That's the scene I most want to see on the show. If they ever pick the show, somebody ever picks the show back up.
They've got to finish it someday. Maybe 30 years later.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done. You can do it.
So there was that. The only other one I'd mention, it was only a bit part in this episode, but Cortazar. You know, the scientist, he's they're getting his quirky, skewed perspective on life. And it's more channeling from what we've seen before with him and what we're gonna see coming up that I know. So we had just a blip of him, but again, I'm like, he's a weird dude and he's performing it right.
Yeah. So that guy looks like he's having fun with that role because playing the kind of not right in the head type characters to be fun. Yeah, I think.
My choice for this episode was Dominique Tipper because I think she does a lot with just very subtle things. Like even just that, again, that one look that crosses over her face after Holden was talking to her about, sending off the sample. And I mean, there's no dialogue. It's just a little look. But if you're paying attention, you can tell that something's going on there, right? And again, it's not fully revealed at this point, but you can tell that just from a look on her face. And so I think she did a lot of subtle things in this episode where she's doing a lot with not a ton. And like even I think the way she reacts to the way Jim is talking to his mother, he's sending a message to one of his mothers. And he says something at the very end about I hope you can meet my crew, basically, one in particular. And there's something on her face. And again, she's a character who has this whole backstory that we as the audience don't know yet. We do not understand Naomi's history, but there is a lot there. And I think that there have been many moments in the show where they're leaning on her as an actress to show us that there's subtext there that hasn't been revealed yet. And she always does it.
She's been pretty good. She's been pretty awesome. I went with a pair that because most of their scenes the episode were together. But I wanted to give a shout out to Sam Huntington, as I called him earlier, Jimmy Olsen from Superman Returns as Solomon Epstein. Best known actually for the American version of Being Human. I believe he played the werewolf. I never watched the show. But yeah, I wanted to give props to him. I thought he was really good as Solomon. But for me, it's Wes Chatham and He Who Shall Not Be Named. Because the two of them, they had some great stuff. I think
they did.
I think it was some of the best stuff that they've had in a while. They don't get to have great scenes together, and neither of them really get that many awesome scenes. The show kind of focuses more on, Naomi and Holden. So, when it comes to the crew and Miller,
Amos gets some Alex, not much.
No,
Not much.
Alex gets
Right.
left behind, and he spends all his time with the Rossi.
Although, honestly, sometimes I think he gets more in the show than he got in the books. Like, he was very shortchanged in the books too. So,
Until
I think
later books.
later, yeah.
Later
But
books.
at this point, he was definitely not much going on for him. So
Yeah, because I'm not sure when the first Alex POV is. I'd have to look that up.
late.
Yeah.
But that's true for Naomi and Amos as well. They all get their first POVs in the same book. I forget which book it is.
I know which one it would be.
It's the book when they all scatter.
Yeah. But but regardless, I mean, some of the other characters may just be like a little bit more involved in the main action. I feel like Alex, like you said, because he was always off with the Rossi when everybody else is not on the Rossi, he just gets left behind the most.
And the jerk really is freaking good in the role.
All right, so I think then we can move on to themes. I have one, which I think is, again, fairly upfront, theme to talk about. But if anybody else wants to start, that's fine too.
I always go last.
I've got one.
Go ahead.
Okay, Jim, why don't you take it away?
Well, it's what Fred Johnson says to Jim Holden when they're having their meeting on the Rotzi. And this is where the trust is clearly starting to break down.
Oh, yeah.
And they're laying some seeds of where we're going to take this. But when Fred basically is calling Jim naive and says, in this world we live in order to survive, you have to pick a side.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you? Or,
Yeah.
there's a theme. This is about picking sides, but can you pick the side of mankind? This is a struggle that we're going to continue throughout this show. The Belters, the Earthers, the Martians. Do you have to pick a side? Because Holden doesn't want to pick a side.
No, he wants everybody to be one side.
Is he the one that's wrong? Is he naive?
Yeah.
You're asking the geek, you're asking the geeky hippie if Holden's wrong on that. And my heart says no, but my brain says, yeah, in a lot of ways, he's wrong. Because, sometimes there are right and wrong sides. In this situation, I can't see that there's necessarily, I can understand why every side is the way they are in the conflict. Yeah, there is a right and a wrong, I think, but which is which, it depends on your point of view.
I think there's not always one right answer to it. I mean, I think where Fred is coming from, and he has a good point, which is that when you have a scenario where there is an oppressed and an oppressor, you do have to choose, because even if you're choosing a neutral path, as the who am I quoting here? Eli Wiesel, I think, saying that neutrality always favors the oppressor. So if you are neutral in a conflict where there is an oppressed and an oppressor, you are favoring the oppressor rather than the oppressed. So I think that is the perspective that Fred is coming from there, because he's, decided the Belters are the oppressed. And Naomi, again, same thing. This is her decisions in this episode, is that the Belters are the oppressed. No one else is going to look out for them. We have to look out for ourselves. And if you're not on that side, then you're on the other side, the oppressor. So
yeah,
but there is
one of the oppressors has 30 billion people it has to provide for. So I can understand why, to an extent, not that I agree, but I can understand why they're very much more, we've got to take care of ourselves first before worrying about there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, part of the problem is, it's just the nature of the system they're still living in, because most of the people that are oppressing the Belters are the corporations, and the military's just there to back up the corporations. But if that's at least the way it seems in the book to me, is that it's the corporations that are doing most of it. We never hear, except for the Anderson Station, but that was all because one company wasn't getting their money.
Yeah. And you may have a point there, because it ties into something that Avasarala said in this episode, which is that Yeah, we always think the corporations have more power than the government, but the only reason for that is because people who work in the government are looking to get an eventual payout from the corporations themselves. And I think she has a very good point, which is that because she doesn't look for that, she doesn't want that, she can be like, F you to the corporations, and I'm going to do what I want because I'm not looking to get paid by you. And that's a very good point.
And who's she saying that to? The guy we already know is in bed with Jewel Pierre Mao.
Deep in the pocket.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so so there is a point there, which is that, you know, you should be looking at who is the real oppressor, you know, and who was the real power. And then I think there's the bigger, deeper question, which is that, you know, why are people, and I understand that people do this is very much human nature, but why are we looking at Belters and Martians and Earthers as different people? We're all human beings. And if we look at a greater, you know, galaxy-wide issue here, which is, you know, if there really were to look honestly at what the protomolecule is and what it means, that there are things bigger than that, bigger than all of us, right? And that you can recognize that we're all humans and we should want all humans to not die, you know, all humans to have enough air and water and food and all that kind of stuff.
The whole thing that gets to me is when one group of people, or even just an individual person, holds against another person either what their leaders have done or what, you know, others of their ethnicity, if you want to call Belters an ethnicity, which I guess it would be in a sense.
Sort of.
By this time, yeah.
You know, all Earthers and Martians tend to color all Belters the same. You know, when we see a whole bunch of different types of Belters, they're not all the radical anarchist punk OPA types, you know. You know, we've got a lot of them, but they're not all that. They're not, you know, and Belters hold against all Earthers what the corporations and the government does, you know, and you can't do that. Both of those are, you know, they're just wrong. They're wrong things to do, you know, and it just,
and at
that's
the same
what
time,
really gets to me with this. That's why I say they're all very flawed groups.
Yes. So at the same time, I think it's fair to say, why are some of the Belters like the radical OPA types? They didn't become that way for no reason. There are historical reasons why some Belters joined the radical arms of the OPA, and that there are real things that happen. The oppression is real. So
and the oppression started when the company, I think it was Tycho in the case of Ceres, the companies that spun up these asteroid settlements spun them up to 1/3 of a G. That was a big mistake. They should have taken the money, effort, and time to spin them up to 1 G. And then we wouldn't have the Belters would not have nearly as much of a problem, you know.
It's true.
You know, they should also have not allowed children on those stations. You get pregnant, you go back to Earth. No pregnancy.
Well, I don't know how practical that is, but
just don't get pregnant in space.
Expensive.
Just don't get pregnant in space.
Also not very practical.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You know, sign the contract. You aren't doing any of that thing out here. What?
But I think, you know, what you said about, you know, not letting things just keep on at 1/3 of a G, you may have a point there. Yeah.
I was joking.
You know, Holden's got, he's held on to this belief here that we should just all get along. You know, and if you feel you need to take a side and fight, you only are making it worse. That's what he believes in the core. If we just all calm down and work together, we'll hold hands and sing Kumbaya. That's Holden, you know. And so
he is.
There is a little naivete there, you know. Holden or Fred Johnson's got a point.
Yeah.
But we want Holden to be kind of right, you know. We want his perspective to have some influence on what's happening in this crazy solar system.
And especially,
they're both right and they're both wrong.
Especially with the protomolecule being a reality, because that's where Holden's point has some legitimacy, which is that there's a bigger threat here that threatens all humans, regardless of where they are living or where they're from. And if we as a species can't recognize that, then we can't really deal with it. And he's right there. So he has a point too.
Yep.
Anyway, okay, so the theme I wanted to mention is right in the title of the episode, paradigm shift. And I think that they chose to emphasize this primarily by including the Solomon Epstein story here, because they're making this connection, and they did it with a line of dialogue that I think Avasarala has as well, or someone in that scene, where basically the protomolecule, whatever it is, and they don't have a full understanding of it yet, it is going to change everything as much as, more than anything has since the Epstein drive. The Epstein drive changed everything, right? It's a technological innovation that fully changed the course of humanity. And you wouldn't have belters. Belters would not exist without the Epstein drive. And it certainly changed relationships between Earth and Mars and all that. So fully changed the course of humanity. And the protomolecule, whatever it is, again, they don't fully understand that yet. It is also going to create a paradigm shift and again, fully change the course of humanity, perhaps even more so.
Well, and the scene you're referencing, the line specifically ties to the Epstein drive in that saying, this is technology that allows you to move without, and the exact word is slipping my mind, but without the pressures, without those issues.
Reactionless drive.
There was inertia. That's it. No inertia. Okay. And that technology is again another game changer. And that's what they're identifying. It's like, what could we do if we can harness this? And this thing was probably Mars experimenting to come up with that and do it again. Yeah.
So it's emphasizing that, like, again, 137 years before, the whole course of humanity changed because of this one piece of technology that was sort of accidentally created. And
I wrote down technology changes everything as well.
Yes.
Literally, those are the words.
And now, even though Holden has this hope that they're this close to destroying the protomolecule completely, and I understand why he wants to believe that and why he thinks that that's possible, but by the end of the episode, I think it's clear, I mean, even though we don't understand what that being is, but it's glowing blue and it's weird and stuff. So I think it's a pretty solid guess that by the end of the episode, we know he's wrong, right? This is way beyond the point where you can contain it, right? And again, and we don't know this yet, but he thinks that whatever Eros just was destroyed when it crashed into Venus. Nope.
Yeah, we're gonna learn more of that too. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so the UN knows it. The UN knows something's still happening.
Into a paradigm shift. Holden doesn't know it yet, but we are already into a paradigm shift with the protomolecule. And so I think that is a major theme of the episode.
Yeah, I had that one written down too. The one I latched on to was the responsibilities and in some cases sacrifices of leadership. Holden was, he had that whole thing about, he was literally ordering them to their deaths. They didn't end up having to do it, continue burning, but there's that. I mean, everything with Avasarala is always about, the responsibility of leadership. She makes some sacrifices, like last week she made a sacrifice, but Bobby Draper, she's leader of her little squad there, and and she's lost them all, but she had responsibilities of taking care of them all and keeping them in in working order. And then of course Fred Johnson, he even has that line about you would think that saving Earth would change things, but the Mormons don't think that way. They're suing him and Tycho, and he's in deep shit over the stealing the Nauvoo. And that was a decision, a sacrifice he knew he was probably making when he decided to follow Miller's idea and commandeer, the Nauvoo. So I found it in a whole lot of characters, and it actually spreads throughout the whole series. But yeah, the responsibility of leadership sometimes.
Well, and tied to that, the old adage, heavy is the head that wears the crown. You had Holden there with Naomi in their room, that one scene, and he doesn't want this responsibility.
No.
He's like, she doesn't say it this way, but more or less she says, suck it up. You're the guy. We're looking
suck
to
it up, Buttercup.
Okay?
Yeah. And I think that's definitely thematic in Holden's character in general, which is he isn't particularly someone who like wants to be a leader, wants to be in charge, but at the same time, he finds himself in these situations where he's the best person to take charge. And he does do it. He always does it, even though it may not, be his choice. And, but sometimes he needs that little bit of like encouragement from Naomi to do it, because she does do that, for him, especially in the books, I would say more so, where she gives him that, well, you kind of have to, but do it anyway.
Yeah. One of the truest definitions of leadership is someone that people follow. If you don't have anyone following you, you're not a leader. It doesn't matter what you think.
Yeah.
Holden just does what he thinks he needs to do, and people follow that.
Right.
It is just magnetic. They sense his goodness, his purpose, his mission, and they're with him. So it doesn't matter that he doesn't want to be a leader. Sorry, guy, they're following you. You are a leader.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's a good one, that was going to get into spoiler territory, so I'll back off.
Yeah, there's like a major spoiler for Holden that I want to talk about right now, but I'm not going to because that's just too much. But this is part of his arc. It fits in with his arc. Yeah.
One of the things I regret about having finished all the books is now I've got all these spoilers that I want to talk about half the time, and I just no, I got to keep my mouth shut.
This is exactly why on the show I do with my son, when we talk about Wheel of Time, we have a little section at the very end where we say, okay, if you haven't read all the books yet, leave.
Get out.
Now we're going to spoil something, and we just have fun. Now we totally let it loose because you got to hold on to this stuff the rest of the time.
I do allow spoilers, but see, they're a pain in the butt for me because I have to catch them first of all, and I missed a couple last. No, I don't. I put a warning, a 6-second countdown.
That's what you do. That's right.
They get a 6-second countdown, and then there's the spoiler, and there's a bar on the screen saying spoiler content, and then it goes away when the spoiler's done.
Yeah,
and
so people
that has lasted a good 2-3 minutes a couple of times.
So we try not to do it excessively, but occasionally, it does slip in there, but it's it is fine as long as we can catch it and let people know they can skip if they want to. But
just hit mute and watch, and that's why I don't put anything on the screen during that either, because that gives it away to the people who are sitting there with it on mute. It's like, don't show this or that, they'll know what's going on. Right. So, but those guys all had a lot of leadership, and I'd have to admit though, I think despite my grumpiness toward Belters a while back, I would probably pick Fred Johnson to be the person I would follow as if I was going to pick, yes, he is.
No, he's not. He's
Belters what's in your heart. Belter's what's in your heart. Julie Mao was a Belter too.
That's not how a lot of the Belters feel. Just saying.
Well, I think a lot of them would make it an exception for Fred Johnson, to be fair. He has clearly thrown his lot in with them. So I think he gets some.
I just gotta wonder how he went from that point of Anderson Dawes finding him rock bottom and bringing him up and getting the Belters to like him, and then getting him hired at Tycho Station and being made, is Tycho Station owned by an Earth Corporation or is it owned by Belters? I don't know, because they're letting they're paying for the OPA there.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I don't recall it ever being mentioned in the book.
It's funded by Earth. I think.
I think it is mentioned in the books at some point, but now I'm not
about
sure.
the money, and Johnson becomes the bridge. It's like he can lead Tycho Station because he's from Earth, but he's using all Belter workforce to pull all this stuff off. So I think that's why it works. That's how he ends up being the head of this.
Yeah, he's a bit unique in his way to sort of straddle things a little bit.
But for the most part, I think they love him because of the old, again, another adage. It's all about what have you done for me lately? He gets results for them. It doesn't matter what he's done in the past. Now he's making it work. The only ones who seem to have an issue with Fred Johnson are other OPA people who want to be in charge.
Yeah, have different
messing with their power.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
like Anderson Dawes. I love the performance of Anderson Dawes, but Anderson's kind of a douchebag. He really is. He really is.
Well, we'll get to talk about him pretty soon because I think he's
Yes,
got more coming up in
in
this
an episode,
season.
a couple episodes from now, possibly. Maybe even next week's episode.
I think it might even be next week. Yeah, I haven't rewatched it yet though, but yeah, it's coming up.
Any
So,
other
little
themes?
tease.
Anybody
I
latch on to
think
any
we
other
covered
themes?
it.
Those were great themes already.
Yeah,
we covered really. There was a lot in this
To
episode.
bring up? Any notes you wanted to bring up that we didn't talk about?
No,
I closed my notebook. We got it all, man. That was it.
I think
a lot,
we did a good
actually.
job. Jim, it was a blast talking with you again. We had our one and only 2-person panel a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that was fun. And we managed to talk for just as long as the three of us have talked, so if not longer. But
yeah.
Thank you for coming on. And you're gonna be back in a few more weeks.
Get a chance to meet Rebecca.
I really
we're on a panel together at JordanCon, as a matter of fact.
No, I've never been to JordanCon.
Oh, you're not?
Maybe?
No, I've never been. I actually bought tickets to go last year and then I wasn't able to go. And I'm at a point in my life where it's very hard for me to do 2 cons in a year. And I'm program director for WoTCon. So that's my con until I can
get that. That's why I'm not at WoTCon, because
my wife will forgive one. I get it.
Yeah.
2. Yeah.
So there can only be one. I mean, not really. Some people do 2, but I can only pull off one at the moment. So,
Jim, you want to plug your channel? Tell us before we go.
Always for that opportunity. Thank you very much. Yeah. Come check us out. Fantasy for the Ages. That's where you find us. We're on all normal podcast platforms, but we're really putting a lot of content on our YouTube channel now. A lot of stuff that is only on our YouTube channel. And while some of what we do is working chapter by chapter through the Wheel of Time, my son and I, there's a lot of other stuff on all sorts of fantasy and sci-fi. We've done Expanse stuff. He's finally reading the Expanse. It's like, dude, what took you so long? He said after he read the prologue of Leviathan Wakes, he was like, oh yeah, I'm in. I'm all in. This is the best freaking prologue I've ever read.
It's really good.
He's hooked. But, and we have stuff for everybody. We do 5-minute episodes. We do 90-minute episodes. So whatever people want to find, come check us out.
And he does a bunch of shorts too.
Bunch
of shorts.
Yep. Even including my most popular short is how to make a Long Island iced tea.
Oh,
go figure. It's not fantasy, but drinks go real well with some of the episodes.
Now you guys are doing a reread of the Wheel of Time, correct?
Yes. Yeah. He and I have both read. I've read it many times. He's read it all the way through once, and he's read some of the earliest books twice. But so for him, it's a little fresher. For me, I've got a little deeper that I can pull from. But we do it in a spoiler light format, we call it. So we talk in depth about what we're covering, but we highlight foreshadowing and hint about this is important. Remember this, but we don't tell people why, because we want them to discover things for themselves. So a first-time reader gets a little deeper experience if they follow us as they go through it. And the people who've read before get all the wink winks and nod nods, and we enjoy it.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah.
Check his channel out. Rebecca, anything coming up with reading the pattern?
I have a video that I'm very slowly working on, but I also need to film my WoT Idol parody, so that may come first. We'll see.
And is WoTCon tickets on sale yet?
Absolutely, yes. The only thing that is not on sale yet, but will be soon, are our virtual tickets for WoTCon. So, and we're doing some new things with that this year, so I'm excited about that. And programming information is like coming together. It's it's getting exciting. So be more and more about WoTCon in the very near future.
Hope to hear it soon. Myself, I will be recording later this week with my buddy Bill and with Dr. Philip Chase from the YouTube channel Philip Chase, discussing the Tombs of Atuan by Ursula K. Le Guin as we continue our original Earthsea trilogy reread. It's another book. All 3 books in that original trilogy are books I literally haven't read in 40 years until just like recently. So it's been quite an experience rereading those. And we had a great conversation with Philip the first time. I hope you guys check it out. It'll be out this coming Sunday, next episode. So everybody, thanks for being on. Thank you at home for watching. Please come back and don't forget to be awesome.